Okay, let me just start with this. I am a sucker for Cyberpunk. Not just the tabletop series anime and video game franchise, but the entire subgenre as a whole. The Matrix, Ghost in the Shell, and Total Recall are some of my favorite movies of all time. Don't even get me started about Neuromancer and Snow Crash because I could talk about those books for hours, if not forever. So, naturally, I would adore the Marvel 2099 universe, this unique blend of the superhero genre with cyberpunk elements. And back in the 90s, this was a pretty fresh idea. Fast forwarding over a century into the future to see what heroic legacies re-emerged, stuck around, or morphed over time. This timeline of the Marvel Universe was introduced to me by a good family friend, someone I'm incredibly close to. He was the one who got me into comics and even let me read from his vast collection. And one book that always caught my eye was Ghost Rider 2099. Now, I think we can all agree that Ghost Rider as a premise is inherently cool. A vagabond traveling the world on his motorcycle using demonic powers to fight back against the powers of hell. That's a concept that makes for inherently intriguing storylines and cool imagery, as well as a million retcons, but I guess that just happens to some characters. Yet the 2099 variant of this kind of story is taken into a completely different direction in comparison to all the other Spirits of Vengeance. And if I'm being real, his story is the most punk out of all the series in the 2099 verse. Yes, even compared to Spider-Man 2099. Don't get it twisted, Miguel O'Hara is my guy. He's my second favorite Spider-Man. Sorry, Miles. I like you too, don't get me wrong, but I met Miguel before you, so... Look, that's just how it goes. I'm sorry, man. But Ghost Rider 2099, in my opinion, is probably the best comic out of all the Marvel 2099 comics, with its titular character being one of my favorites to ever come out of the Marvel offices, presenting us with a grimy, corrupt, and oddly philosophical world. So without further ado, come along with me as I talk to you about Ghost Rider 2099. Yeah, today's video is brought to you by me. Yeah, I couldn't really think of anyone to affiliate with or a sponsor I could find because I'm not that big yet. So, hey, comment, subscribe, do all that. The whole spiel of 96% of you guys are not subscribed and you watch my videos. Maybe you should. Could be pretty cool. I make a lot of cool stuff. But yeah, if you want to do that, go right ahead. I'm just going to remind you that I'm not going to try to baby you. I don't expect you to do anything. So yeah, have a good one. Like, subscribe, comment. What's your favorite animal? What's your favorite pizza topping? All right, yeah, I think that's good enough. We'll continue the video now. Let's introduce the basics, shall we? Before the Ghost Rider of 2099 was created, he was originally a data thief named Kenshiro Cochran, aka Zero. It's a bit generic, but it's not a bad cyberpunk nickname by any means. Though one day he was targeted for a hit by a rival group, and upon death he sent his mind into the net. While within this world of data, he encountered the Ghostworks, a small group of sentient hidden AIs who had plans behind the scenes. These borderline unknowable entities that would take Zero's tragedy and turn it into their gain, crafting a skeletal machine body and naming it after the Ghost Riders of the heroic ages, putting Zero's mind in it and sending him back into the world. And this is where we start the story of Ghost Rider 2099. First, let's just take a minute to look at this design. The digital fire above his head, the flaming chainsaw, the chrome sheen, the crazy cool leather jacket. We're all in agreement that this is objectively cool, right? Yeah, nobody's saying nay? Good, because it is badass and we've agreed on this now, so there's no way you're going to argue against it. Basically, the first chunk of Zero's story is just him making a tear across Transverse City, which is a sprawling megacity that stretches from what used to be Chicago to Detroit. That doesn't surprise me at all, actually. He gets into battles with corpos, Securicops, and even a cybernetic werewolf named Werewolf, spelled W-A-R-E wolf. Get it? Like where? Like software? Never mind. However, it isn't simply just cool action for the sake of it. You could see this is basically Zero taking out his revenge on the world that literally left him for dead. What's even worse is we find out about Zero's father, Harrison, who works for the major company Demonics. Man, you're just not even trying to hide the fact that you're an evil corporation, huh? But anyways, we find out that Zero kinda hates his father for pretty good reasons. His father was always stifling him and basically tried to teach his son obedience over anything else, which explains his rebellious personality. The craziest part though is that we learn Harrison is the one who put out a hit on his own kid, just because the company saw Zero as a threat. Like, holy shit man, I'd hate my father too if he's the one who paid money to get me flatlined. These issues are also here to set up the world and a large side cast of characters throughout the series, like Dr. Neon, a sort of dorky, shy type who's pretty good with code, Anesthesia Jones, a pretty strong lady who basically runs the undernet with a few others. We also get introduced to Kylie, Zero's ex-girlfriend. Well, it gets kind of complicated, with Zero being technically dead and all. The writer of the series, Len Kaminsky, already shows he gets the whole ethos of the cyberpunk genre pretty well. It's not just that it's about criminals in low-life settings with high tech, but examining what forms of rebellion or desperation would form in these hyper-capitalistic settings. Essentially, the genre is the antithesis to the classical sci-fi tropes you'd find in a series like Star Trek. In these worlds, tech, money, resources are hoarded by those who don't need them. So those with the know-how have to scrap and scramble just to do anything to survive. The first artist on the series, Chris Bacalco, I think that's how you pronounce it, illustrates to us well all these designs into a digestible form. Though while I'll admit it's very 90s in how it interprets a cyberpunk future, that doesn't take away from the great art and expressions he provides. On paper, this Ghost Rider should be a pretty emotionless character, yet he draws them with such strong faces and variety. Despite him being a machine, we can always tell what's on his mind. That's a lot easier said than done, so hats off to you, Mr. Bacalco, and sorry if I mispronounced your name, I'm really bad with names in general. Though, while I'm at it, I'd also say one of the later artists in the series, Ashley Woods, gives him a run for his money sometimes. He has this different art style that's so strong and jagged with harsh inks and exaggerated bodies. To be honest, there's a lot of times where his Ghost Rider 2099 looks completely inhuman, and I kinda dig that more than Bacalco's Rider at times. But I also think their styles are so different from each other that it practically boils down to a taste thing. Me personally, I think I prefer Ashley Wood, but, I could see why you'd prefer Bacalco. In fact, that's a perfectly reasonable take to have. Back to the story though, from here we get a dark tale about the lines between human and machine, AI interference with human history, and self-discovery all wrapped in a chrome shell with a blood smear on top. One of my favorite issues in the series is issue 13, and it's not just because Dr. Doom is in it. For those who know me, you know I like Dr. Doom a lot, but let me shock and finish before you judge, okay? As I was saying, this issue is fascinating because it has very little Ghost Rider in it. Instead, he's rebuilding himself after basically being killed in battle. Now, by killed, I mean he's been torn apart and turned off. Yet, during all this, we see many characters having these conversations about life and what it means, which is contrasted by watching Zero's cybernetic body slowly regrow itself and connect back together. It's an oddly potent story about existence, the body, and how it molds our perceptions and forms of control we may not even be aware of. The story around this, as in the few issues before and after, Zero is kind of in a state of unknowns. He's suspecting that the Ghostworks did something to him because there's certain phrases he can't say and certain memories he can't even access. On top of all that, he's forced to accept that he can't save the life he used to have. He's beyond whatever he was before. He can't stay with his girlfriend, he can't stay with his crew. He more or less lives a solitary life built around rebellion. He never really has the time to sit down and think too often because he's always bouncing from one chaotic event to the next. So when I say that the arc after this one is one of my favorites in the series, and honestly a super nuanced story about control and how someone's personal identity could be changed by extreme outside control, I do genuinely mean that. Dr. Doom, yes, that Dr. Doom, the one who fought the Fantastic Four, has basically taken over America by force, becoming its president. In this chaos, obviously, who's there to confront his ass but the Chrome Rebel himself, Ghost Rider. Yet, unknown to Zero, the Ghostworks have chosen to back up Doom. Thus, Doom knows Zero's override code and changes elements of his personality in the literal blink of an eye, turning Zero against all his previous beliefs and making him believe he wants to be a federal marshal, a super cop if you will. Think something like Judge Dredd. Now, I know some would say that this is kind of a character assassination, but the story really takes its time to delve into what this means. We see Zero spiral and disrespect the life he used to love. His soul knows who he is, but his programming says otherwise. And this is fascinating to me, because not much of his personality changed too much, yet with some mild suggestions and coding changes, they've rewritten so many elements about him. It makes us question how much autonomy the Ghostworks has really allowed Zero, and why they even created him in the first place. It also makes us question how much autonomy we as modern people have. Do we really have that much free will, or are we letting subtle programming and hints steer us away from thinking on our own? We also get one soul-destroying character moment between Zero and his father. Zero shows up to see his father, and of course they get into a fight. Zero, seeing his own mother basically turned into a brain-dead body just watching the TV and other feeds all day. Yet the real screwed up part is his father says he's proud of him. Not because his son has shown that he's a man or that he's formed some kind of maturity. No, it's because his son's an officer who has power now. He's proud that his son can basically have a standing in the world and command others. Zero, obviously, hates this. But this creates a moment of reflection for me as a reader. In a world where people basically have to kill each other to go anywhere upward, would that not be the normal thought process? Should we blame Harrison for his terrible worldview and abuse of his son? Or is it that we should blame the system around them for making these ideas okay to the average person? Or is there truth somewhere in between? Sure, we know that's wrong, but think about it. Zero's the weirdo here. He's the one acting with a sense of altruism when the world couldn't give two shits if he was found dead in a ditch. Actually, he already did, and we see where that went. Zero is basically a man trying to fight for his freedom in a place that doesn't even know what that means. It's interesting stuff that you really kind of have to consider when reading these kinds of cyberpunk stories. All of this culminates into one final story of Zero more or less trying to break free from the control of the Ghostworks, finding himself at his lowest in life, betraying everyone he knew, becoming the very thing he swore he'd never be, struggling to even identify who he is. Many background factors finally emerge to screw up his life: an ancient demonic AI, a new cybernetic life form, and Zero quitting the police force, becoming public enemy number one to everyone. It doesn't help that there's an entire underground group of cyberspace rebels trying to take him out for his association to the corporations. But eventually, despite it all, Zero does find his own version of freedom and leaves the world behind. A world that would have never given him the freedom he wants and deserves like most people do. And thus, it leaves us to wonder where he's going next, and if he'll ever return. So, I think after all that, you can imagine why I'd like this version of Ghost Rider so much. There's so many interesting elements of discussion to be had around this version of the character. The ideas of free will, identity, morality, and so much more. Sure, maybe he's not the Ghost Rider the citizens of 2099 wanted, but he's the Ghost Rider they deserved. And what that says about the cyberpunk dystopia is up for you to decide. Because really, what is a hero in a cyberpunk world like that? Would they wear a cape like your traditional do-gooder? Or would they be a complete vigilante like, say, your Punishers? Or maybe there is some kind of answer in between both of those. Who's to say? But to me, Ghost Rider 2099 is one of the most interesting characters Marvel has ever put out. Because he really does make you question a lot about what cyberpunk means and what it even means to be a hero in a world where there isn't any. And to me, that is what makes him the best Ghost Rider. And yeah, that's all I gotta talk about on that. I really like the Marvel 2099 line, like I said earlier, and I kinda think it's a little bit slept on by the mainstream at times. I get it, a lot of it's kinda edgy 90s stuff, and I understand the stigma around 90s comics being only for edgelords and not being well written. But there is a lot of gold in that era too that I think we kind of push aside because it is just edgy. Not saying that all the edgy books are a good thing, not every book can be like the Max. But there's still good stuff here, you know? So I guess what I should ask you is, what's your favorite Marvel book or Marvel 2099 book? Is there any edgy comic books that you think are kind of just looked over because they happen to be just edgy? Are there any cyberpunk comic books that you think are really solid? Let me know in the comments below. And with all that being said, I'll see you next time.